coordinator at NRRA, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. We have a great panel who are going to answer all of the recycling questions you may have. And I will introduce them in one moment. Briefly, they are Reagan Bissonnette, the Executive Director at NRRA, Bonnie Bethune, the Senior Member Services Rep, also at NRRA, and Brian Patna, the Solid Waste Manager of Lancaster, New Hampshire. Before we start with all the questions, which I hope you have, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Recycle Right campaign. So this event is part of our Recycle Right campaign, which is a 4-month campaign that NRRA is running. It actually began in April, and it is going to go through to the middle of August. So with our, there we go. So our Recycle Right campaign has 3 goals. It's really designed for lay people, and it's designed to be shared. It's a digital campaign, so you'll find it on Facebook, Instagram, we have it on our website, and we also have a bi-weekly email that we send out with all of the information and images. The main goals of this is to help encourage residents to recycle more, recycle better, and to create an evergreen Recycle Right campaign, which means a campaign that your communities can use now or in the future. So we're trying to put out information that doesn't necessarily get old, or at least doesn't get old fast, because we know that recycling is a constantly changing and evolving process, which is fantastic. So I just talked about the components of the Recycle Right campaign. This is where you'll find us. I have been posting throughout the day. You've probably seen me creepily taking pictures around. That's what I'm doing, trying to share and get the word out about the conference and about the work that we're doing. This campaign is also funded with a grant from the USDA. So thank you to them. And here's where you can find more information. So thank you for listening to my quick spiel on that. I do hope you go on our website to find out more and sign up for our emails. You can jump in at any time. And if you ever have any questions or think of anything that you think would be helpful for us to tackle, please let me know. I'm always open to adding more information in there. It's really whatever is most helpful for your communities. Again, this is a campaign designed to be shared by you. So without further ado, if you guys would like to introduce yourselves briefly, and then this entire session relies on you. So I hope you have questions.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Bethune. I've been with NRRA for almost 20 years, and prior to that I was a manager at the New Boston Recycling Center here in New Hampshire. So I came to NRRA with that perspective, and I learned something new from all of the operators every day about how things are evolving in the recycling world.
And my name is Reagan Bissonnette. I'm the Executive Director at NRRA, and I've been here for almost 3 years. And before I joined NRRA, I was working in the nonprofit world, but didn't know a lot about recycling and waste management. And so a lot of the questions that I hope you'll ask today are the types of questions that I was asking when I first joined the organization. And it's been a lot of fun to learn. And now I serve on the New Hampshire Solid Waste Working Group, which is a group that is designed to help the Department of Environmental Services here in New Hampshire with planning for our solid waste future.
Good afternoon, I'm Brian Patna. I am currently the solid waste manager for the town of Lancaster. I am definitely a lifer in this industry. I started as a freshman in high school back in '98, and I've been addicted to this field ever since.
Great, so we're gonna open it right up to the audience. If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll come to you. Don't be shy. Otherwise, I have a whole lot of questions that we've been asked. Oh, great. I'm going to give you the microphone so people are also listening.
Hi. So my question is for the NRRA. I didn't see a lot of biosolids or organic wastes, ash, ultimately the residues, which are all recyclable. So is that part of NRRA's mandate or scope, or is that something that's going to happen, or what's your take on that?
So the Northeast Resource Recovery Association was founded principally to help communities with recycling. And we are focused on municipal recycling programs. And so what we traditionally help communities with is just about anything that's going through a residential recycling program. So we're talking about all kinds of, containers, glass, plastic, aluminum cans, fibers such as mixed paper and cardboard. We help communities with household hazardous waste, tires, propane tanks, refrigerant recovery. But some of the things you described are not as commonly going through that residential recycling system. So that really covers our scope. We do work with a number of communities to support them with some of their composting in terms of leaving yard waste. We do some education on food scrap composting, even though that's quite prevalent in Vermont, less so with our New Hampshire communities. But by and large, we are very much focused on the residential recycling systems.
Jim Dennison from Webster. Are you talking about ash from Berkstead or commercial?
Industrial ash from incinerators, from biomass plants.
Out of my lake. We have ash, when I first got the job at Webster, we had a mound of ash and I heard that when we burned brush. I did the proper paperwork, went through a test, sent it 3 10-wheeler loads to Lebanon to the landfill. And then I found out anything under 500 ton didn't have to be tested, and it is shipped out in construction and demo now.
My first school, Steve from Hampshire, and it seems like mattresses are a funny thing. There's some people basically accept them, and other people charge $40. And there's some people that don't touch them. So I was wondering if you could give me a story of what's really going on with mattresses.
Mattresses are a very interesting subject. A lot of it depends on where they are ending up in a landfill or getting recycled and stuff like that. So, like when I ran Littleton, for example, when I first got there, we didn't charge much for mattresses, but we ended up actually tearing them down to recycle the metal, and then the fabric ended up going to the landfill. We then had an issue with bed bugs in the area, so we stopped tearing them down and they went directly to the landfill. Landfills don't like them just because they're not compact, and that's, I think, one of the big issues with them right now.
And I'll add that different states have different rules regarding mattresses. So for example, in Massachusetts, they are in the process of implementing a mattress disposal ban, meaning that mattresses will not be able to be landfilled or incinerated in Massachusetts. And you'll find that that's impacting some New Hampshire communities as well. Border communities that are currently sending their mattresses to Massachusetts are going to have to find other alternatives. And so in some cases like this, when you have a ban, you're going to see that drives more businesses to fill that gap. And so I know that there are a number of mattress recycling companies in Massachusetts and also in Vermont. And I will add that on our website, which is NRRArecycles.org, we have a resource section, and we have a section that we refer to as information sheets. And we have an information sheet specifically listing companies that can handle mattress recycling with their contact information. So even though we're typically not connecting directly to those mattress recycling companies, it's just a resource that we're making available to our members and to the public.
I have My question is actually something that was posted live stream. How is the NRRA dispelling the notion that a single stream truck picking up both recycling and the mixed solid waste, that not everything's just going to a landfill?
Well, it's great to have a question come in from one of our live streaming attendees. We do have a number of folks joining us remotely today. That's a tricky one. You know, there are a number of communities that have one truck that picks up on one side their trash, on one side recyclables. I live in the city of Concord, New Hampshire. That's how we do it. And so I am confident that the trash is getting disposed of and that the recyclables are getting processed and recycled. But what I would say is recycling is a business.
Oops, we had a technical error and the video cut out. Reagan was saying that recycling is a business, so it doesn't make sense for towns or cities to spend a lot of money on recycling facilities only to throw everything in the trash. They want to recycle as much material as possible, both for the revenue from the sale of the recyclable material, as well as avoiding the cost of sending material to the landfill or incinerator. And now, back to the recorded event.
What is that number or percentage of volume that is not recycled or recyclable due to contamination? And I know it varies from location to location, state to state, but what is it 20% of sale of glass that is too contaminated, that always ends up in landfill, and that's the goal we're trying to reach? Or is it more like 50%? Is it better with paper? Is paper more recyclable, less contaminated because people are more diligent in cleaning it out? You know, is there like a broad number for those three products?
I think the best number I could give you would be to point to some reports that the Northeast Recycling Council has put together, where they have gathered data from a variety of these materials recovery facilities, both single stream, where all your recyclables are going into one container, or dual stream, where your aluminum cans and glass and plastic are going in one bin, and then you're putting your paper and cardboard in the other bin. And when they've looked at data from all of these material recovery facilities, one of the numbers they look at is the percentage of material that's coming out of those facilities, how much of that is basically having to be disposed of. And so that's kind of a number that we could look at. And, you know, it's on average, we saw that around, 15% by weight of the material coming out of those facilities is not able to be recycled. And of course, as you alluded to, it can vary widely by community. So that might not be true for your community, but looking at a number of these facilities across the Northeast, that's at least a number that I could point to.
And of course, it's going to vary drastically by commodity. If anything goes through NRRA working in logistics, if we've got a load of aluminum cans that is baled aluminum cans or full tractor trailer load, we're sending pictures of that commodity. We are getting incredibly detailed feedback on that load, and they will tell us if it's 2%, which could be the cardboard headers you put on the bales to keep them together. They're going to give us that detailed report, and if there is contaminants in there, we're going back to our municipality saying, you were deducted so much for this weight. So there's a lot of back and forth feedback. The material that NRRA members are producing is top notch, and we're learning all the time what the expectation of the market is, and constantly trying to please those markets so that they come back to us and look for that commodity. So again, depending on baled versus loose, where is it going? What are their expectations and their tolerance for contamination? So there's a lot going on with each commodity.
And I want to add on commodity specific to speak specifically to glass. Glass is, I'd say, by far the most challenging commodity coming out of these residential recycling systems. So glass can be infinitely recycled. However, the best way, the most effective way to achieve that is in states that do have a bottle redemption system. The bottles that are redeemed through those systems, you know it's a pure source of glass, and therefore companies will actually pay money for that glass, and then they can turn that glass into new glass bottles and jars, or they can turn it into fiberglass insulation, whereas a lot of glass that goes through single stream systems in particular, by the time you get that glass pile coming out of the materials recovery facility, often it has a lot of plastic and paper and other things in it, to where it almost looks more like a pile of trash than a pile of glass. That glass is often very heavily contaminated, and there's not a good outlet for that type of glass. So I don't want to say that all single stream glass is getting landfilled, but by and large, that's the most difficult commodity where we see the most contamination. And one of the things that's unique about what we do with the Northeast Resource Recovery Association is because we work with so many small rural communities that are separating out their glass, we're able to provide actually a very clean, pure supply of glass to a vendor that we work with, to NRRA Resources, who's actually in our exhibit hall, and they're able to then send that glass to their customers to actually be made into new glass bottles and jars and fiberglass insulation. Communities we work with who separate out glass who aren't actually able to meet that really strict standard, we're able to instead work to help them crush that glass into an aggregate, and they can use it in road and infrastructure projects. So we get a lot of calls about glass, both from communities and also from regional groups, because our recycling program is pretty unique because glass is such a problematic commodity that in many places around the country, it is largely being landfilled, unfortunately.
As a source separated smaller municipality, for my product, I strive for 2% or less. Even at that, you think when you ship out 44,000 pounds at a time, at 2%, that's still a lot of contamination, which the mills do not want to pay for. So we strive for the cleanest we can get.
One more thing on the single stream. So there's a lot of the bigger companies, when they're contracting for single stream material, they'll often give a discount for a single stream without glass because of the points that Reagan made. We call it single stream with a twist, but we're seeing more and more of that. Pulling out the glass, it doesn't contaminate the fibers and the plastics that are in that material, and it's being captured more readily than at the end of the process at the MRF, where it really does, it's really hard to tell it's glass.
I live in a small town. I'm actually a select person. One of the issues we have is that we're going from actually two steps. We had a source separated system that was a little bit costly to run, but we had a couple of employees leave and another one died, so they decided they were going to switch systems and went to a single source. It's not entirely single source. They have a bin for plastics, and we have a bin for plastics and metal, aluminum, and another bin for paper and cardboard. The hauler is pulling it away over and over again, telling us it's contaminated. So we're looking at going back to our old system. We have a baler. We don't know if it's the right baler, and we have a building and land, and even a storage facility. So we need some help to help sort it all out. What does NRRA do to help small communities like us? We're 1,000 people, less than 1,000.
We've been working, just for an example, we've been working with the town of Bristol, who prior to COVID was single stream recycling. Bristol is probably about 2,500 people, seasonal influx, of course, in the summer. But they have been little by little adding back into pulling that material out. They started with cardboard. They small town invested in a horizontal baler, which is pretty aggressive for a small town. And they've got a very pristine system to take that cardboard, bale it, store it, and we actually moved a tractor trailer load the other day. We started back in August of 2018, having this discussion, where do we go from here? So they stopped single stream altogether, they stopped recycling, and little by little, they looked at each component. What is the most volume to come out of the waste stream, out of the recycling stream? And they chose cardboard. And it's been very interesting. So oftentimes at NRRA, we will refer you to somebody who's been in a similar situation as you have been. If you were single stream going back to source separated, we want you to talk to those communities, see what they've decided to do first, see what their goals are. And that's really the best that we can do as far as, kind of connecting the dots. See what others have done. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to take it on all at once, but have a plan.
I'm just wondering what your opinion is on the New Hampshire bottle bill, if you think that there's any opportunity that will pass in the near future, and are there downsides to it versus recycling?
I think eventually it will pass. It's been failed multiple times, what was it, 30 something times throughout the years. Once again, it's the big downsides as a transfer station manager I see is less revenue because we're using the plastic and the aluminum. You wouldn't have to pay for the glass, which we currently have to do. So we'll lose a little bit of revenue, not much. The other thing I see is just the infrastructure right now. I think that is one of the bigger issues in New Hampshire, which I think the state does have to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I would basically agree with that, one of the other challenges that people bring up with bottle bills is that they're not always designed to be as efficient or effective as they could be. I'm sure there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from other states. We've seen that some of our neighboring states are actually trying to expand their bottle bills that they have, because initially there were certain exemptions, certain types of materials that, didn't get included. So, but I think we have a lot of examples around us, and so those could be used and then looked at as sort of lessons for how to design something that would work well. Politically, I don't think we're going to have a bottle bill in the immediate future, but perhaps in the future.
Remind me, Reagan, is there a bill in the legislature now for?
Yes, but I believe that one has already been, basically, it's not going to go forward this session. There were about 19 solid waste bills introduced in New Hampshire this year. Many of them generated by interest in the proposed landfill in Dalton, New Hampshire. Most of those bills are no longer active, but there's still a handful that might actually get signed into law. And if anyone wants more information about those, we do have on our website regular legislation updates that we provide under our news section. And again, our website's NRRArecycles.org.
Quick question. Styrofoam blocks and peanuts. Any source to put those in, or landfill?
For now, landfill, but we do have some creative communities out there that are looking into some solutions for expanded foam, EPS, expanded polystyrene. There we go. And that's the town of Guilford, who is working with a company to bring in what they call a densifier. So it's a piece of equipment they bring on site and they densify down into blocks. Those blocks are then used to make framework for windows, to make into a product. So we've got the town of Guilford working on that. So we'll be watching carefully how that progresses. But you're probably talking to the only person who's ever actually baled a bale of polystyrene foam. And basically when it pops out of the baler, you can push it with your finger and move it across the floor. And it took a long time to do that. And at the time, back in the 80s, the only place to take it was New Jersey. Well, trucking a load of polystyrene to New Jersey didn't make sense at the time, and it still doesn't. So reuse of those peanuts if you can, those packing peanuts, and again, our purchasing power to not buy that material if we know it's got styrofoam in it. Big ask, but I think doable.
I'll add that the Northeast Waste Management Kingdom district in Vermont is also looking into possibly being part of this foam recycling pilot. And as Bonnie alluded to, one of the challenges with, one of the concerns about recycling foam is that it's a super, super lightweight item. And it takes a massive amount of it to compact it and store it so that you can then transport it to an end market where it can be recycled into something new. So you have to look at how far you're having to transport it and what that environmental and financial cost is to transport it.
One of my former bosses, Tony Lacqua, always said, everything is recyclable, you just need that critical mass. And that is probably the biggest issue with styrofoam is the weight.
Hi, sorry I'm so far in the back. I'm circling back to the conversation about the bottle bill. And I'm thinking about New Hampshire the Beautiful, which is the diamond sponsor for this conference. And they do wonderful things. They sponsored our school club, whatever you call the school club. We did a trash on the lawn day, and they do a lot of signs, which is wonderful. They also give out bags for our Earth Day roadside cleanup. And it seems to me that that's kind of a backward way to make New Hampshire beautiful, because what happens is, because what I'm getting at is I wish that they could put efforts into promoting the bottle bill, because if we want to keep New Hampshire beautiful, the best way to do it is not to let litter accumulate all over the roads in our public spaces 364 days of the year. And then we get these bags and we go clean it up on day 365. So one day it's cleaned up and the rest of the year we're littering. The other problem with the cleanup that frustrates me, because I organize in my town with help, is that when we have these blue bags and we clean up along the roadsides, a lot of it is beverage containers. And what happens at the end of the day is all those bags of trash, which are a large percentage beverage containers, go into the MSW. They don't get recycled. So not only are we not keeping New Hampshire beautiful by reducing the litter, we're not recycling the thing that we should be recycling. And is there a better way to do this?
Right, so the New Hampshire Beautiful is a nonprofit organized by a number of food and beverage companies. They include a lot of grocers in New Hampshire. And yes, it's correct that they were organized in part because they wanted to avoid what their industry sees as very costly regulation in terms of bottle deposit bill. They do have a lot of concerns about some of the inefficiencies of some of the existing programs. So it is accurate that from their perspective, they are more interested in supporting recycling in terms of helping provide grants for communities to purchase certain equipment for their recycling programs. They also actually provide a lot of signage in New Hampshire for municipalities for free. You know, and they have a couple of other programs along those lines, such as the litter, free litter bags. So, you know, we don't have a representative here to speak to that, but yes, from their perspective, you know, they are concerned about some of the logistics and the expenses that the bottle bill will place on their industry.
And in my opinion, people that are gonna litter are gonna litter no matter what. It may deter a little bit because they'll get, say, 10 cents back. But you go over to Vermont and Maine, the ones with the bottle, and there's litter over there also. It's just one of those things. The people that are going to do it are going to do it, no matter what, unfortunately.
Another live streaming question. Please address plastic grocery bags, etc., that are returned to stores. Do most supermarkets send them to Trex for manufacture of plastic lumber? If so, what is the range of items that's accepted as plastic bags?
So when you and I take our plastic bags because we forgot our reusable ones at home and we bring them back, they can go back to, I was at Walmart the other day and they had a bin to take those plastic bags. And they do get recycled. They go back, the distributor brings the food, brings all of the cans and so on, and it takes back baled cardboard and those plastic bags to a distribution center where they are most likely baled and shipped to trucks to make into plastic lumber. So it's one of those things that we can be assured that it's happening. What's in that container, it should be anything that stretches. So sometimes you get your grapes and something and it's all that crinkly plastic, doesn't stretch. So you wouldn't want that in there. So we're not just talking plastic bags that we get our groceries in, we're talking bread bags, and we're talking dry cleaning bags, and again, anything that stretches. So there's quite a opportunity to get that material again out of the waste stream. Be assured that Hannaford is not going to put that container out there just for the fun of it to throw it away. We've talked to them, and that's part of the Trex program, which is a pretty important program. So hopefully that answers the question.
And I just wanted to add two things. One, it's really important that those plastic bags be returned clean and dry, because if you send a stinky, dirty, wet, nasty bag, you can end up contaminating sort of the whole bunch. So that's an important piece. So if you've got something really messy, then you're better off throwing that away if you're not able to get that clean and dry. And then the other piece is Trex decking is made, it's about 90% is made from that plastic film. And then the other 10% is sawdust.
I'm going to add on before I go to another question. This is a great example of something that we actually just shared yesterday, or this morning actually, as far as the Recycle Right campaign, a graphic with all of this information specifically about how to recycle plastic bags and not to just throw them into plastic recycling.
Just to follow up on that, there is also the website howtorecycle.info, and there's also the WRAP program, WRAP, which is very much involved in reclaiming the shrink plastics.
Just to follow up on the plastic bags, so my question is, why is it so difficult for local transfer stations to get on the Trex bandwagon and recycle the plastic bags at the transfer station? Why can't we get on that truck?
I always refer people to Hollis when they have a question about recycling bags at the transfer station. What I hear most is that we just can't do one more thing. So in that case, we just recommend that they tell people, please take it back to your grocery store next time you go. So it really comes to be just that one more thing.
Lancaster recycles them. We only get maybe a ton a year though. So it's very time consuming for a little bit of material. The other issue I have found is we personally are throwing away probably about 15 to 20% of the bags that come in because of the contamination. And that's the other big issue we are having. We do it just because wood pellets in the winter, we get a lot of them. One of the big issues I have found, not to single them out, is Shaw's up in Lancaster now does curbside pickup. They put a sticker on the bag, therefore destroying recyclability.
Follow-up question for you. So what is the most common type of contamination that you're seeing with those bags that are coming in?
Most of the time, it is the non-recyclable plastic bags, like your grain, your cheese, stuff like that, that just isn't that stretchy. No.
To follow up on the contamination of plastic bags, so if you do get like wood chips inside there, does that basically make that bag, you can't recycle it anymore because it has those little bit of leftovers that came from chips? Or the other one would be if there's a paper sticker on it, does that basically say you can't recycle that anymore? Or the other ones are salt, right? Because a lot of the softeners come in plastic, stretchy plastic bags, but they have a little bit of salt in it. So how much contamination is really makes it a negative to the whole process?
As Brian mentioned, the label on there would be a contaminant. Somebody suggested if you have pellet bags, turn them inside out, give them a shake, get as much as you can out of it. That's really what they're looking for. I don't know if I'd go as far to recommend that you wash them, but I probably would. Just because. And then you have to dry them.
Once again, you are allowed a percentage of contamination. The problem is, you still want it as clean as you possibly can, because as a transfer station, you know you're going to miss some stuff. So if you can try to get out as much as you can, just to be safe.
I have a question about education. NRA used to have a school program, I don't know if it's still in existence. We're talking recycling, shouldn't we be directing this to the individual? And other than that, not a town, somewhere that somebody grassroots knows what's the truth, something. Is that education that we should be focusing on?
We do still have a school recycling club where we have the staff who are able to go to schools and talk with them about recycling. Actually, our most popular workshop is called a Trash on a Lawn Day. And it's essentially a program where the school will save its trash for the day and then without telling the students. And then the next day we send a staff member in and they actually sort through all the trash and they do a waste audit. And they separate it out with, gloves and a tarp outside, and they see what could have been composted, what could have been recycled, how much of it truly was trash. Sometimes students will find their entire uneaten apple that they had tossed in the other day, or a piece of paper that they should have recycled. So that is a great educational opportunity that we do offer for schools. In terms of sort of individual education, I'm not sure I entirely follow the question, but I always say, when in doubt, you should be talking with your local transfer station staff because they really are a great source of information, and it's very difficult to make generalities about recycling because every community is doing something slightly different, and it depends on what companies they're working with to accept their recyclables. So just because, one rule applies in one town, it may not be the case in another. So it's really important to check in with your local recycling staff because they really are your best source of accurate information for your community.
And if they don't have the answer, I'm typically getting a picture on my phone, which I'll send to their vendor, say their plastics vendor that they use for their town, and that picture goes to them, and they say, yay, nay, don't ever do it again, or, so we get back to them, and then I've learned something that I can pass on to another operator who may have that same question. So it's constant education, and
In our industry, education is key. I am a firm believer that next Wednesday, I'm having a group of the local high school come and actually do a tour and talk to them for a couple hours. More for environmental impact and recycling, and still that is part of our job. The big key, in my opinion, is every time you have a question at the transfer station person should just say, not say, no, we don't take that. You need a reason. And I think right now, one of the big things is most transfer stations, because of influx of material from COVID, they do not have that time to actually just sit with somebody and explain it to them. I still try to. To me, that is my job. I let my workers do the bailing more or less, and I am kind of the guy that will answer any questions while I'm there. But it's that education is the key.
It's a great thing to be from New Hampshire, and I grew up in the city of Boston, and I moved to a small town in New Hampshire where we recycle very well. Now I'm a snowbird, and I'm in Florida, and they have single stream. And the wife and I look at it, it's almost, am I wrong in assuming it's all ending up at a landfill? I mean, I put cardboard in, cans in. If it gets wet, it's no good, if this and that, if it's raining out, they pick it up. I mean, is that the education we need, not the single stream? I mean, is that, I mean, in New Hampshire, we've got the single stream in Manchester. How well does it do? Or does it do any good at all?
These guys answer, but personally, I hate single stream.
So I touched on this a little bit beforehand, but basically, if you're in a community with single stream recycling, and I live in Concord, New Hampshire, it's really important, again, that you make sure that you are putting in your recycling bin what your community says it accepts. So, I look carefully at what my community says I can recycle, and I make sure I'm only recycling those items. And that very much, dramatically increases the chance that everything I'm putting in my bin is getting properly recycled. One of the upsides of single stream is that it is more convenient for residents because they don't have to do the separation themselves. Another piece is that single stream often requires less staff time at your local transfer station because it does take more time and energy to separate out materials and bail them separately and then market them separately to send them to different companies to recycle them. But at the same time, single stream recycling tends to result in higher levels of contamination and also can be very costly for communities at times. Those prices vary, but I would not say that all single stream is being thrown away because again, recycling is business, and it's not cost effective for these communities to be separately collecting all your recyclables and then just throwing them away.
kinds of rechargeable batteries, does NRRA find that they're gonna be looking for more vendors on the horizon to accept these batteries from us? As these batteries start becoming more and more out there? It seems like we only have a few vendors perhaps.
Just to backtrack a little bit, we got an email the other day, actually it was a phone call from one of our vendors, which we don't typically get, it's outlined in an email, but it was one of our scrap metal vendors who this time of year with people cleaning out for spring cleaning, a lot of electric toys, things with batteries in them that you and I may not even think are part of what we're throwing away. We're not thinking about that. So in answer to that, we go back to our members in a notification outlining what they can do differently. We have a number of vendors that can take the different kinds of batteries. They do have to be separated from rechargeable to lithium and so on. But we do have that opportunity to recycle those or process them.
I guess, Bonnie, what I'm asking is, and Amanda, maybe you can speak to it more, is we're starting to see batteries that we can't take out of things, like sneakers, stuffed toys, and you had a vacuum that we couldn't get the battery out of. So do you think in the future there'll be avenues where we'll be able to put that stuff in Gaylords perhaps and send off to somebody for battery recycling?
So what Lancaster does on that type of stuff is we just ship it right with their electronics. And they have the tools and stuff to properly recycle. That's what we do personally, as far as, because we're the same way. There's a lot of material. You can't get the batteries out now. That's one of the big issues, and that's causing fires everywhere, unfortunately.
This is my own question, but Brian, what do you think is your, as a transfer station manager, your biggest grr? Like, what is it that you're just,
Only one. Anybody that knows me knows that I hate throwing anything into a landfill. And right now, the biggest thing is it not being cost effective to recycle our C&D. I hate seeing good wood going into the landfill. Lancaster, we get more C&D than we do MSW right now, just because of all the renovations. Last year, I think we almost did double the amount, and it is so frustrating. It's C&D, construction and demolition debris. The other thing is, which I hated to see, and this was back in I think 2009, is when legislature the bill that banned C&D burning in New Hampshire. Not that that's the best area, but seeing a good 2x4 that they'd rather see it landfilled than burned is very frustrating to me.
Well, and I'll add to that we recently applied for a grant with the Environmental Protection Agency that would allow us to focus a bit more on this issue. So if we receive this grant, we would be working with the 20 communities in Coos County, New Hampshire, who right now, as Brian said, have limited access to opportunities to recycle their construction and demolition debris. And so we would be doing, working with Lancaster, doing a pilot project to test out some ways to improve pulling metal and wood and other products out of construction demolition debris. so that they can be recycled, and then also looking at opportunities to at least densify construction and demolition debris, so when it is being transported to landfill, you have to spend less money and less transportation emissions to get it to the end market. So we'll find out later this summer if that's a grant that we receive, and if so, we're really looking forward to diving into this issue and then hopefully being able to apply what we learned to communities throughout New England.
A few more minutes. We'll get a couple more questions. I'm actually going to go right back here.
Just to follow up on the batteries and electronics, it's probably 3 weeks ago, maybe a little while longer. One of my staff members was actually trying to take the battery out. I'm not sure what it was in a car. And you had that strong smell of burning whatever it is, electronics. So right then, we decided to implement exactly what you just said. Couple 6 in our electronics, and dispose of them in that manner until we hear otherwise. The other thing we started to look at is I saw this on recyclable bicycles. One of the things we in Sunapee get on average probably 2 dozen bikes a year, maybe more, and many of them are in really good shape. Often they end up in our open top and the recycling method. And I think that there's obviously a better use for that. We're in the process of trying to find a bicycle repair shop, or a bicycle repair shop, recycle those, and possibly give them back at a fair rate to needy children and stuff like that. That's something that they have the opportunity. And then last but not least, we accept Texas. In Sunapee, we have a thrift shop that we bring the textiles down to, and they sort through them and sell the ones that they do good, that they go back in the bank. And from there, typically goes to landfill. I haven't found. I had an idea about maybe getting them to bring refugees, find it in one that. What are your thoughts on what to do with textiles that don't I don't have a plan in box, I don't want them.
Textiles, I always quote as the one thing that NRRA doesn't work with, pretty much everything else. And we do depend on those, the boxes that are localized, that take, they like to take all of the recycled, all of the textiles, the good, the bad, as long as it's clean and dry. Because that, again, is a business. They're doing exactly what your thrift shop is doing. So it's really all we would have to offer as far as, just looking at on our info sheet on the web. We have a number that we have talked to other communities and they've recommended them, and they are geographically placed. So that's the best we can offer there.
I'll just add that we do have Apparel Impact, who's a conference sponsor and in our exhibit hall, so you can also speak with them as well.
The issue is if you're just leaving them the junk, it's going to be a lot harder. Even though I know that's frustrating, they are a business, they are probably reselling it, they have different grades. Usually the stuff they pick up from a shop is lower grade than what they pick up at a transfer station. And it lowers the grade, unfortunately, and sometimes they don't want it.
Yeah, I did talk to them, and they said that typically the lower grade were shipped away to become insulation.
kind of walk and talk. We did just create a poster all about different types of batteries that you can print and put up at the transfer station or anywhere else, letting people know about different batteries, how to recycle them, or deal with them, dispose of them, and that lithium ones especially are super hazardous.
I've talked to different people today that some towns were accepting plastic 1 or 2, some were 125, some were 1257. Is that a factor of where it goes, or with carriers picking it up, or why is there such a difference on what people take? Some people don't take black. There's just a lot of rules. And I'm wondering what's the basis of that?
I'll speak towards the transfer station. A lot of it depends on labor costs. The more you separate, the more revenue you get, but at the same time, it costs a lot more because you have to separate, you have to have the room, stuff like that. When I ran Littleton, for a while, we were separating the number 1s, the number 2 mixed color, the number 2 natural. We then running low on help, so we started combining, and I think now they do 1 through 7s, a lot less revenue, but they're making it up on a lot less time, so they can have time to do other things.
The issue with black plastic is that in many cases, these plastics are going over a sorting line once they kind of get to their next destination. And the conveyor belt is typically black. And so a lot of the what we call optical sorters, machines that are looking to see what type of plastic this is, they can't read the black plastic. And so that black plastic is not going to get captured and recycled. And so many companies that accept plastics will say, we just don't want black plastics because we can't get them effectively recycled anyway.
Plastics probably follow glass for being complicated, and there are many programs in our membership. It could be loose programs, it could be 1 through 7. Actually, it's about a quarter of our members do a 1 through 7 baled mix. We have 2 companies that take that material, so that's, again, time savings. 1 through 7 sounds like a lot of plastics. It's mostly 1s and 2s, your soda bottles, your milk jugs, and your Tide bottles. Number 5 is the next valuable plastic, which is your tubs and your lids that have a 5 on them. I challenge any of you to find a number 3 these days. It's a polyvinyl that used to be used for ketchup to keep it, the acid from breaking down. I have one, I'm saved it. And the number 6s, that leaves the 4s, the 6s, and those crazy 7s that could be anything left, but the majority is being pulled out as the 1s and 2s, and with some really hope for 5s in the future.
Right, and I'll add that one thing we hear is concerns where one community is, say, single stream recycling, and so they'll accept all types of plastics, except they don't want film, of course. And then someone will say, well, my community only accepts 1s and 2 natural and 2 colored, and why won't they recycle the rest? Well, they're picking the items that have the most value, they're thinking through the staff time, and they're also looking at what is the most volume. So they really are focusing on the large amount of plastics that are coming through their system that they can get recycled and get their revenue for. So they're being a bit more selective. It doesn't mean that they're actually doing a bad job, they're just being practical.
The beauty and the curse of an Ask Me Anything is it can really go on forever. So we've reached the end. If you are interested in an Ask Me Anything that had a little bit more of a focus on the basics and nitty gritty, we do have a video up on the website right there. It's about an hour long. It does have subtitles that you're also welcome to view and share. But I just want to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you for answering all of the questions that we got today. Thank you.